The night was as dark as the depths of a grave, the kind of darkness that swallows everything in its path. The only source of light was the faint glow of my car's headlights cutting through the thick, inky blackness of the highway. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white with tension, as I navigated the desolate road. My phone had long since lost its signal, and I had no choice but to rely on the road signs that appeared at sporadic intervals. I had been driving for hours, chasing the elusive promise of escape from the troubles that haunted me. My mind was a whirlwind of regrets and fears, and the empty highway seemed like the perfect place to lose myself. But as the miles stretched on, I began to feel a growing sense of unease. It was as if the very road itself had come alive, whispering secrets to me in the hollow wind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something lurked in the shadows just beyond the reach of my headlights. I told myself it was just my imagination, a byproduct of the isolation and exhaustion. But deep down, I knew it was something more. As I drove further into the night, a dense fog began to roll in, obscuring the road ahead. My heart raced, and I slowed down to a crawl, straining to see through the thick mist. Shapes and shadows danced in the periphery of my vision, and I couldn't help but feel that they were closing in on me. And then I saw her. A figure, shrouded in the fog, appeared in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, my heart in my throat, as I watched her come into focus. She was a young woman, her tattered dress clinging to her emaciated frame. Her eyes were empty voids, and her skin was as pale as death itself. I rolled down my window, my voice trembling as I called out to her, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" But she didn't respond. She simply stood there, staring at me with those empty eyes. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and a cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do, and then, with a sudden burst of speed, she lunged at my car. I screamed, slamming my foot on the gas pedal, and the tires screeched as I swerved around her. I glanced in my rearview mirror, but she was gone, swallowed up by the fog. My heart was pounding, and I continued to drive, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just narrowly escaped something truly sinister. As the fog began to thin, I spotted a sign up ahead. It read, "Welcome to Harrowsville." Relief washed over me as I realized I had reached a town, a place of refuge from the horrors of the highway. I pulled into the gas station on the outskirts of town, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Inside the station, I found an elderly attendant behind the counter. He looked up at me with tired eyes as I approached. "Long drive, huh?" he said, his voice raspy. I nodded, my nerves still on edge from the encounter with the woman in the fog. "Yeah, it's been a strange night." The attendant gave me a sympathetic smile. "You're not the first one to have a strange night on this highway. Harrowsville has a way of bringing out the oddities." I couldn't help but feel a chill at his words, but I brushed it off as a simple warning about the fog and the strange locals. I paid for my gas and headed back to my car, determined to put the highway behind me. As I drove through the town, I couldn't help but notice how quiet and deserted it seemed. The buildings were old and decrepit, their windows boarded up, and there were no signs of life on the streets. It was as if the town had been abandoned long ago. I continued to drive, my unease growing with each passing minute. And then I saw her again, the same woman from the highway, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my chest, but this time I didn't swerve around her. As my car came to a stop, she turned to face me, her empty eyes locking onto mine. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she raised her hand and pointed to the road ahead. I followed her gaze, and my blood ran cold. In the distance, I could see the highway stretching on, disappearing into the fog. But there was something different about it now. It was no longer the road I had been driving on. Instead, it was a never-ending expanse of darkness, a void that seemed to stretch on for eternity. I turned to the woman, my voice trembling. "What is this place? Where am I?" She didn't answer. Instead, she simply stepped aside, allowing me to pass. As I drove onto the endless highway, I realized the truth. I was trapped. The highway was a nightmarish loop, a never-ending cycle of terror and despair. No matter how far I drove, no matter how fast I went, I would never escape. The woman in the fog had shown me the way, but it was a path to nowhere. And so, I continued to drive, haunted by the horrors of the highway, trapped in a never-ending nightmare, with no hope of escape. For more chilling tales, subscribe and give a thumbs up.